energy problem's one of these incredible problems, and the progress of civilization, you can almost measure it as the price of energy goes down, so many great things happen. We have a civilization that's based on very cheap power, and it's great. We need to continue that. If you look at what technologies could really provide the electricity demand, say 40 years from now, there are very few. And most of the ones that are kind of cute and cuddly have two big problems. I'm talking about solar PV, solar thermal, solar chemical, the various solar approaches, or the wind approach. Those two have, one, it's energy farming. And so the density, the acreage involved, the watts per square meter of those things, it makes it very hard. And when you do farming, you get wind, you get snow, you get, your capital equipment isn't in a coal plant that's protected from the elements. It's large and widespread. So that's very hard. But even if you get past that, there's the intermittency problem, where you can't, on a 24-hour period, or when the clouds screw you up or the wind doesn't blow, you have this storage problem. And you can ask, I think, reasonable researchers, will there be in the next 40 years the ability to store, say, the amount of energy that the U.S. uses over a 24-hour period in, pick your favorite technique, battery, water storage, thermal storage. There aren't many choices. And it's not clear. We should work on that. Professor Sadoway, a lot of people are looking at radical battery technology that could, in terms of cost and capacity, get us in a very different space than even the lithium learning curve will get us to. So you don't want to just bet on those, because their costs are hard because it's farming, and the intermittency thing. Once you get above, say, 20% from intermittent sources, you've got a problem. It's cute, it works well up to about 20%, where you ask the baseload guys, which today those are the hydro, coal, natural gas, nuclear guys, you ask them to suck it up when the wind doesn't blow. Anyway, nuclear in some ways is the coolest of all, because you put the plant near the demand, and you don't care if there's sun or not. There's lots of countries that don't have sun and wind much at all, and so you have to say, are they willing to have the political risks of having their energy coming from, say, Libya, and over some big transmission infrastructure? Anyway, nuclear has the advantage that the amount of energy sort of per atom is about a million times better than coal or natural gas. So you start with this huge advantage, and yet, given the complexity of the plants and the things you have to do, you more than wipe out your million-for-one advantage. And today's nuclear plants are fairly expensive, at least the way they're built outside of China. They're quite expensive. China's actually building them in 3 years and competitive with coal, so they're pushing the state of the art, and they're standardizing designs and things like that. Anyway, so nuclear is one of the directions that we should innovate in. Nuclear innovation stopped in the 1970s. We basically have this sub-design thing that was put into Shippingport for the first power generator, and we basically built 400 of those that are all kind of custom, but not in any interesting way. They're all LWRs and PWRs. So nuclear in terms of baseband is incredible, and if you use this approach we're talking about, it is infinite. That is, you can filter out of the sea very cheaply enough uranium to run this thing for as long as the sun will shine. So in that sense, is it, quote, renewable, quote? Well, it's infinite. You don't worry about the amount of uranium. So anyway, I think it's one of the approaches that a ton more should be done in. We need more money in material science. We need more money in batteries. We need more money in transmission. This is an underinvestment area where, if the government actually does raise trading money or carbon tax money, some of the bills that have been proposed don't actually fund R&D at a reasonable level. So it's kind of a tragic thing that hopefully if we get a revenue source, that we can take the energy R&D and get it up, maybe a factor of 3 or 4 more. There's a few good things going on, like DARPA-E, but that doesn't work for nuclear. But I love nuclear. It does this radiation thing is tricky, but They're good solutions. You know, it was interesting recently in Connecticut. This natural gas plant blew up 11 guys. It just blew them up. Actually, I think killed 5 and injured 6. If that had been a nuclear plant, you know, everybody would know about that. You know, coal mines. Yeah, China did a good job last year. They went from 3,300 guys dying in coal mining accidents to 2,600. Very impressive, don't you think? But if nuclear had killed those 2,600 people, I mean, we would just be, you know, kiss the whole industry goodbye. It's interesting, you know, deaths per megawatt, nuclear is the minimizer of these things. But it's got a lot of challenges. But, you know, it's great. I'm glad that there's this renaissance of people going into nuclear. We have this company, and everybody in the company is either over 60 because they have done something, or they're in their 20s or 30s because they're open-minded and optimistic. So it's an interesting bimodal. We don't have anybody in their 40s and 50s because that was the nuclear shutdown period, is when those people would have been trained.
And not really a matter of choosing, but when you look at sort of the technological trajectories of those 3 industries, solar, wind, and bio, which one do you think has the most potential long term?
Well, clearly the one with the most potential is solar electric or solar chemical. You know, all of those things are intermittent sources. That is, they're not 24 hours a day whenever you want them. They are only available at certain locations. The wind doesn't blow everywhere. The sun doesn't shine a lot everywhere. You can't grow things everywhere. And some countries have very little of those nice locations. And so these things are hard. In terms of just the raw physics, the amount of energy that's available for solar is phenomenal. And even though it's wildly expensive, you know, wind has to be subsidized by about a factor of 2, solar by about a factor of 5, and that's only when they're just a small percentage of the power. When they get to be any meaningful percentage, that's where the problem of their intermittency becomes overwhelming, and you can actually spend way more to try and solve that problem than you spend on the overpriced stuff to begin with. But solar, it's hard. With wind, you can actually create a lower bound of what it's likely to cost in terms of the materials and things. With solar, you can imagine that it'll get very cheap. Even today, even if they gave you the panels for free, the installation costs make you non-competitive. So you have to think, okay, are there going to be robots? Are there going to be scale for these things? But you can dream about solar electric and solar chemical. And as you said, we should pursue them all. You know, I've got investments in dozens of energy companies. The most interesting portfolio is what Vinod Khosla has in his venture fund. It's quite phenomenal. There's a lot of great companies there. But, you know, battery companies, solar chemicals, solar thermal, there's a lot of IQ. And that's really, I think, if you want a leading indicator that you can feel good about, the amount of IQ working on energy today and the kind of tools they have to communicate and simulate versus 20 years ago, it's night and day. Yeah. And so, but it's very unpredictable whether we're going to get a breakthrough or not. And all 3 of the problems are serious enough that uncertainty makes you think, well, why don't we put more into R&D? How do we encourage that? Why don't we do more pilot type things?
Just to refresh us, the 3 problems are?
Cost, security, and the environment. So other than the fact it's too expensive, you could get cut off at any time, and you're destroying the planet, it's all okay. Photovoltaic is, its intermittency, I think people deeply underestimate what a huge problem that is if you're trying to design an energy system where PV is more than just a hobby. Right. If you're doing PV as your last 3 or 4%, you know, it's nice, the sun shines during the day, people turn their air conditioners on during the day, it's nice, you can catch some of that peaking load, particularly if you get enough subsidies, and you know, it's cute. You don't take a photo of your coal plant, you take a photo of your your few little panels, and it's nice. But the economics are so far from being, in terms of mainstream energy, so far from being appropriate. And that's where subsidies, where do you put the subsidies? Do you put subsidies on R&D, where society always underinvests in basic research? Do you put the subsidies on the deployment? Today, we're putting overwhelmingly 90% of the subsidies are on deployment. This is true in Europe, it's true in the United States, not on the R&D piece.
Three trends in solar. There's the big, utility scale stuff out in the desert. There is the sort of smaller solar installations on office roofs and large commercial spaces, and then there's all the way down to the residential. Each one has its own sort of efficiencies and a lack thereof in terms of generation, but large transmission differences about how to get it onto the grid. Does the one in the home makes no sense in terms of the overall energy generation, but might link up with the electric car and sort of some micro generation form as local storage. Notions like that. When you look at the big picture of where should we be focusing? Should it be massive stuff in the desert? Sort of middle-sized stuff on office roofs, or is there a reinvention to be made at the home?
If you're going for cuteness, the stuff in the home is the place to go, because it's really kind of cool. You have that little thing on your roof and everything.
Yeah.
If you're interested in the energy problem,
yeah,
it's those big ones in the desert. I mean,
cute is now a pejorative.
Well, the problem is rich countries can afford to overpay for things. We can afford to overpay for medicine. We can overpay for energy. We can rig our food prices. We can overpay for sugar, cotton. It doesn't, our politicians aren't told that we're suffering because we're overpaying for these things. In the world where most people live, 80%, energy is going to be bought where it's economic. And so the rich world is not necessarily the best steward of which solutions are going to work for the world at large. And for the CO2 problem, even if the rich world did very dramatic things, it doesn't come anywhere near to solving the problem. You have to help the rest of the world get energy at a reasonable price in order to have gotten anywhere.
So a lot of people are very optimistic, as you know, with wind and solar, the renewables cost coming down, the battery costs are coming down. You think that's enough, or do you think we need more?
No, that is so disappointing. I mean, really. Václav yesterday, he said, okay, here's Tokyo, 27 million people. You have 3 days of a cyclone, basically every year. It's 22 gigawatts rate over 3 days. Tell me what battery solution is going to sit there and provide that power. I mean, let's not joke around. You're multiple orders of magnitude, $100 per kilowatt hour. That's nothing. That doesn't solve the reliability problem. And remember, electricity is 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. Whenever we came up with this term clean energy, I think it screwed up people's minds because now they don't understand. I was at this conference in New York, I won't name it, and they were saying, all these financial guys got on stage and said, we're going to rate companies in terms of their CO2 output. And we're going to say this company puts out a lot of CO2 and financial markets are magical, and all of a sudden the CO2 will stop being emitted. And I was like, okay, how are you going to make steel? Do you guys on Wall Street, do you have something in your desks that makes steel? What? Where's the fertilizer, cement, plastic? Where's it going to come from? Do planes fly through the sky because of some number you put on a spreadsheet? So the madness of this so-called finance is the solution. I just don't get that. There is no substitute for how the industrial economy runs today.